This, we're going to be talking about the Elaine Race Massacre. And in my opinion, both of these occurrences were massacres. I don't know how you cannot think of them as massacres. They weren't riots. But remember when I said that 90% of African Americans prior to 1910 lived in the South and that the majority of African Americans were sharecroppers? Well, this put them in a compromising position. Most white landowners want to do business with black sharecroppers because they prefer to do business with black sharecroppers because they were literate, couldn't write, and they couldn't challenge them. So here comes your second key term or concept, freedom ticket. Remember when I said to pay attention to the major train routes that were going up north? Well, Mr. Stafford had talked about how the Chicago Defender was actively kind of promoting people to go up south. To go up north. A freedom ticket was a voucher that promised Southern Black men jobs and lodging up north in lieu of labor. So a lot of when these companies needed labor, they would contract with a lot of these railroad companies and they would send these railroad down into the South and they would stop in these small towns. And literally, when they handed out these vouchers to these Black men, literally, it was not a big deal for hundreds of them to get on the train and be taken up north. This is the reason, one of the reasons why the cities grew so fast, so furious, because the railroad system was taking them up north. And if you remember the major routes, a lot of those are under railroad routes. Now, freedom tickets were one way to escape sharecroppers from the South and go to the North. At this point in time, as I said, the economy of the United States is contracting. We are still overproducing in food, which causes food prices to drop. People are still going up north in lieu of jobs. So white landowners are having problems with their labor pool. So they are having to give a little bit more compensation for the work. And they don't like this because they're also getting less money for their crops. So this is one of the reasons, and as Mr. Stafford said, this is one of the reasons why if you're gonna go up north, you simply didn't tell anybody. More than likely, you owed somebody. And then even if you didn't owe somebody, you would be very highly discouraged not to go up north. Okay, now, I know a little bit about the Elaine Massacre because my people are from Arkansas and I had heard it from, I don't know if it was my father or one of my relatives. So I was kind of, a little familiar. But when I started writing my book and it popped up and I said, well, I need to go do something about this. So I said, where is Elaine? And so this is a map of Arkansas enlarged and it's connected to right here, bordering, I guess, Mississippi. And it's next to what I would call Blink, Arkansas. If you blink, you'll miss it. So this is blown up down here. This is Marvel, Arkansas, and Elaine's on, Highway 44 down in Phillips County. Now, this story.
So I see a
oh, go ahead.
River though.
Yeah,
I just was noticing
right next to the river. So this story is a little bit more complex. Basically, what started this was that you had Black sharecroppers were trying to get more for their work. So they formed a union, and the union, it was kind of dangerous to form a union at that point in time, but they went ahead and did it. They approached an attorney out of a law firm, Bratton and Casey, and Attorney Bratton, and a white guy, he agreed to take the case for $25 a head. Now, it was 68 Black men who approached him about this. So he stood to make, I believe my math is right, $1,700. Now, I have a feeling that Attorney Bratton kind of knew what was going to go down. But if you look at the conversion rate, $1,700 in 1919 is $26,476.11 today. So Bratton stood to make a little bit of change. Plus, they had a deal. If you can make a side deal and get a little bit more from the white landowners, then go ahead and do that. I don't care. We just want these conditions met. Okay, no big deal. So they went ahead and paid them their money. To compound matters, several groups of sharecroppers had gotten together and had said that we're going to refuse to harvest this season's crops unless we receive this for compensation. Now, for all of my people in Arkansas, for all of my people in agriculture, you know that if you don't harvest something by a certain date, it spoils, which means that those white landowners were going to lose their money if they didn't get their stuff harvested. Okay, so if you notice the time frame that this race riot or race massacre took place, this happened over a period of about 7 days, okay? So on the night of September 30th at about 11 o'clock, something around that, one of the guys, Robert Hill, who had formed the union, Progressive Farmers and Household Union, he had a group, they all met at the Hoopspur Church near Elaine. This was, from what I envisioned and from what I read, this was kind of in the backwoods. Okay. So about 11, they met and they had armed guards outside because they weren't crazy. They knew they were going to get some kind of opposition and somebody might come. And so what happened was that you had 2 policemen and a Black trustee in the area. Now, supposedly, this late at night, they were in the area because they got lost. They were going to serve a warrant to somebody who was totally unrelated to this group. However, their car broke down mysteriously.
Right.
And and so they approached, so their story went that they approached the church and that somebody started firing on them from the church. Regardless, when the fire was exchanged, one of the policemen was killed, one was wounded, and the Black trustee, he was unscathed. So what happened then was that word went out. And
the word went
go ahead.
The word went out that Black people in Elaine were organizing against whites in the surrounding counties. And so it goes back to that notion of that dangerous Black man that's floating around in their heads in these white people that live in these surrounding counties, that old myth of the dangerous Black man, the King Kong theory. And so that was the rallying cry. These niggas are organizing. We got to do something about this. We're not going to let these niggas rise up against us. And so, you know, that created a mass hysteria. And if you involve liquor and guns, and it was nothing nice at all. So that's what was floating around in everybody's head. But so you have 2 things. You have that myth of the dangerous Black man that's a threat to humanity that must be snuffed out. And at the same time, you have the whole notion of Black people, their lives having no regard, no value. So you have these 2 dynamics going back and forth in the heads of these whites in these surrounding counties. So they knew they could get away with killing these dangerous Black people. And so when they converged on Elaine, Arkansas, it was no mercy. And it was something that I'm sure that they had been waiting for.
The tripped out part was that a call went out to the governor. He responded by sending 58 soldiers, and I believe it's from Fort Pike outside of Little Rock that they came from. But they came from a machine gun battalion, I don't know what it is about machine guns back then, but they brought a machine gun. You had about 1,000 white vigilantes that came from the state and from Mississippi bordering Arkansas because they had heard of this planned insurrection. So they cut the telephone lines to Elaine. And when the white soldiers arrived, they ordered that the white women and children be evacuated from the area. And then a call went out for every Negro to disarm. Then
Wow.
at a point in time, these soldiers in this vigilante mob hunted down any Black person within a 200-mile radius that they could find. And much like the race riot in Tulsa, people were just mowed down. Eventually, when calm returned, and again, some of these people were put in concentration camps, what I call concentration camps. Some of these people were detained, okay? 122 people eventually detained, Black women and men, and they were indicted for murder and night riding. You know, you're driving while you're Black, night riding, okay?
Can I put a little point? Just, I mean, what it inspires something. If a decree comes out, and I hope I'm not starting anything here, but if a decree comes out to disarm yourself, that might be something you might want to disobey. I mean, not to start anything, but I'm just saying, it's if there is any law that you're going to break, you might want to think about breaking that one, because our mayhem is about to take place. So I just kind of want to.
Out of this 122 people that were indicted, out of these 102 people that they got for murder and night riding, 12 were indicted for murder, murdering 3 white men, even though 2 of the white men were accidentally killed by the white vigilante and mob, and they had nothing to do with that. They were still blamed for the murder. So these 12 men were known as the Elaine 12. These are some pictures from Elaine. These guys right here, these beautiful guys, I think there's 12 of them. These are known as the Elaine 12. And unfortunately, now I believe they were all exonerated, but it took until 1925 and a series of Supreme Court appeals for them to finally receive their freedom. And so they remained in jail for a couple of years. As Mr. Stafford said, again, as in the Tulsa Race Riot, in Elaine, they tried to blame the Blacks for what had happened. And so they came up with all of these stories that the Negroes planned to kill all the whites, and they were given passwords, and Negro-led pot to make money. Yeah, they had a plot to make money. They wanted to make more money. It's not like they were robbing somebody. They just wanted to get paid equal compensation for equal days' work. That is all. That is not a crime. As far as I know, it wasn't a crime then.
I mean, this is America. So
this is America. Okay, so in the aftermath of the Elaine massacre, a little bit over, I've seen that up to maybe 300 Blacks were killed, but basically 200 Blacks were killed, 5 whites were killed. This says 65. I had 122 were, 65 Blacks were indicted by Phillips grand jury and tried. 12, the Elaine 12 received death sentences, all were released by 1925. Now, we come to our comparison and contrast. Which occurrence was more devastating? You know, supposedly you got, this ranges in Tulsa from 36 to 300, but like I said, I tend to believe the Red Cross estimates. And actually I've read some that, you know, even 300, a little bit over 300 might not be a totally accurate figure. Over here, 200 Blacks were killed. I'm not trying to measure, you know, a life is a life, but if I'm going to say more were killed, and I've also seen estimates that maybe 300 were killed over here. I would have to say, I would have to go with this, just from the scale of the devastation and the pictures that I've seen. It might be unfair, but real estate land loss, I really couldn't find an estimate about how much land was lost on the Elaine side. But I do know the 35 city blocks were destroyed in the Tulsa Race Riot. I do know that that whole Wakanda community that we talked about was destroyed. And that is a city, it's more industrialized. So it's going to be harder to rebuild. It's going to take more money to rebuild over in Tulsa than what it would take to rebuild over in Elaine, because it's more rural. So you don't have as many buildings and all that. To a certain degree, both groups were put in concentration camps, detainees. I call them concentration camps for short periods of time. So that is basically a wash. Now, in the Tulsa Race Riot, Dick Rowland was eventually exonerated. So, he finally got free. The Elaine 12 were also eventually exonerated. The interesting thing in all of this is that no white person was ever held accountable for murder or destruction of property in either occurrence. So no one white received any judgment. And so it became kind of what my instructor or my mentor, OBDK Kamau, said. Sometimes Black men don't get justice. They get just this, which is nothing. Okay.
And it's a recurring theme throughout our history, throughout America's history.
It is.
It's life. And it also shows you how history just continues to repeat itself.
It does. But the thing is that, we've been talking. I know some people are Johnny come lately and they really don't pay attention to anything going on. They don't like to read for some reason. But we keep dealing with the same issues decade after decade, century after century. It's just in a different form. Now, remember when I said treating teaching history like water instead of static? If you look at history statically, 10 or 20 years from now, when we talk about the Black Lives Movement, they will probably list Breonna Taylor as the time when things popped off. But truth be told, if we're gonna, use the Bruce Lee approach to teaching, we have to go back and look, because to me, this whole Black Lives Matter movement now basically kind of started from the Colin Kaepernick thing. Standing for the flag, sit down, stand up. Just because I don't stand for the flag doesn't mean that I don't love this country. It just means I don't love what's going on in this country. Me personally, I do stand for the flag. I'm just saying that, I understand somebody's right not to or to. But to me, if we're going to talk about history, if I was going to teach the Black Lives Matter movement, I would at least have to go back to Colin Kaepernick and then go all the way up to, some of the Black men who have been shot. Ahmaud, I forgot, I always butcher his name. The brother who was shot when the police officer came into his studio down in Dallas.
It's just been a recurring theme throughout our history.
It's been a recurring theme, and
it's nothing new. Black Lives Matter is new in the aspect that it's been it took off really fast, and it had a very, very wide reach for what's supposed to be a grassroots movement, and it had a very wide reach, and that's more so because of social media. But the catalyst to the movement, police brutality, has always been amongst us, always been throughout America's history. So it's nothing new.